Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson spewing some breathtaking BS over who's to blame for the failed state of his city. The left-wing leader going on an excuse-a-palooza, blaming everything from right-wing extremists to his predecessor, TikTok superstar Lori Lightfoot. I miss her. Mind you, the last time a Republican was in charge of that place, Herbert Hoover was running the country. He was the 31st president, Dana.
Oh.
Yeah. But before we dive into what Brandon said, here's a quick refresher on the future site of the DNC. Shocking video shows a woman getting robbed by a rifle-wielding gang on a busy Chicago street before the perps victimized 3 other people. And Chicago's so overrun with migrants, they're stuffing illegal immigrants into police stations, churches, airports, and a soon-to-be-built tent city. Residents who live near the new camp are protesting.
When you think about all the things that we allow to slide, this is another thing that, we just can't allow this to happen.
There's no transparency from the mayor, not even from Alderman Ramirez. It's very inhumane to do this.
This mayor is acting like a dictator. He needs to go. He must go.
Ugh, typical right-wingers. But let's go back to Brandon. Chicago's woke mayor wants to blame everyone but himself.
What we've seen is a very raggedy form instituted by right-wing extremism. Everyone knows that the right-wing extremism in this country has targeted democratically ran cities. And quite frankly, they've been very intentional about going after democratically ran cities that are led by people of color. It's the same Republican right-wing extremism that stormed the Capitol. It's the same right-wing extremism that refuses to accept the results of the Civil War. They're still mad that a black man is free in this country. This is nothing new, but aren't you glad that the soul of Chicago won't be broken? And those are the words of, I think, Beyonce. You won't break our soul.
Oh, Jesse. He's like taking a page out of Jussie Smollett's book. It's like there's this huge hidden extreme MAGA, criminal gang going around carjacking and stuff. I don't see any red hats at the crime scenes.
No. Well, you can't blame Biden for opening the border because the FBI will then raid your house. That's what they did here to our mayor. I don't understand why he's saying that whites or conservatives are mad at him. Blacks are mad at the black mayor because he's turned the south side of Chicago into Latin America. No one can even move in that neck of the woods because they're just flooded with migrants. And you have to understand the black community in Chicago is feeling that they're being replaced. And they've said this. They've said that they're Americans, and you're importing a population there, and they're crowding them out of schools, they're crowding them out of soccer fields, out of basketball courts, out of jobs. And if you look at the explosion in the Hispanic population in this country, it's just astronomical. They've doubled over the last couple decades. It used to be 5% of the population. Hispanics now are 20% of the population. The Hispanic population's doubling. The black population in 2060 is supposed to be flat. They are having a lot of children. They're coming to this country. They're going to replace the political power of the black community within the Democratic Party. And the black community in the Democratic Party has been so loyal to the Democratic Party that they can't understand why they would do that. And that's what people are saying in Chicago. Now, this mayor is not trying to fix anything. He's just pointing fingers. He's not progressing. These people are saying, oh, you were establishing so much progress. There's been no progress in Chicago. He's going to fail just like all these other progressive mayors are failing. And then he's just going to wind up at Harvard because that's what they do.
Dana, you look at a lot of the problems that Chicago's facing, the migrant crisis, crime, gangs, tent cities. These are not caused by Republican policies. It's kind of like their political anger is being directed at the people pointing out the problems and not the problems themselves. It's like getting mad at your doctor for diagnosing your illness because he's a Republican.
Right. Well, and also, as you pointed out, that wasn't exactly the right-wing crowd that was holding the press conference. There hasn't been a Republican mayor in Chicago, I believe, since 1927. So I'm not sure how many people are going to buy this. Since November, this year, in the last 6 months, 15,192 cars have been stolen. We could go through all the different burglaries, carjackings, robberies, but just imagine if your city is so bad that a migrant arrives, takes a look around and says, wow, you know what? I think I'll try my luck in Venezuela, like where I might have a better shot. I felt like when he was doing his press conference talking about extremist Republicans, he was almost like trying not to be White House press secretary, because he knew it wasn't going to land. I don't know who he thought he was trying to convince, like shoring up his own base, but it sounded so forced and so juvenile, and it really sounded like someone who's completely out of his depth. And I feel bad for Chicago. And I feel bad for all of the mayors because the White House won't help them.
Yeah, I felt sorry for him. And I never feel sorry for people.
Wow, you had empathy?
Yeah, I don't.
Wow.
It was weird. I thought maybe I had the flu, but it was empathy.
Feels weird, right?
So, Judge, the great thing about Republicans is that you can make fun of them all you want, but we still will help you, right?
Yep.
He could yell at us, but why doesn't he just say, okay, help us? What should we do? Because Republicans will help. We're used to getting yelled at.
He knows what to do. He knows that there were 30 people who were shot this past weekend after Thanksgiving. He is the person who appointed the superintendent of police. He is the one who can say to the police superintendent, sit down, let's talk about policy here. I don't really like your policy where the police are not going to be punished for not chasing a criminal. I mean, that is a policy in Chicago. So as people are losing their wallets, and what we saw in the first video when we started this segment, as people are being robbed openly, the police are not even chasing them. They're literally calling in a Rob 2 on the corner of Michigan and Center Street. I mean, that is his fault. It's his fault it's a sanctuary city. It's his fault the police are not making arrests. Why not talk to your Democrat progressive DA, George Soros-funded DA, Kim Foxx, who messed up the Jussie Smollett case, and say to her, hey, Kim, stop letting him out of jail. You know, we've got real problems. And then for him to turn around and say that there are white people in this country who are upset that blacks are free, that was outrageous to me. First of all, it took white people to elect a black president. It took white people to make sure that we've got laws on the books that don't allow for discrimination. I mean, cut the crap. Stop trying to be so divisive. They just want to create hate and hate. They claim this victimhood and then this outrage when in the end, even the illegals are saying, it's so bad here, you don't listen to minorities. I'd rather go back home.
Jessica, I feel like there are two issues here, and that he's deciding to go towards one than the other. They're the real issues, the real problems. And then he goes, but we're being targeted. We're being targeted. And I assume he means something like Fox News, the media, who are constantly pointing out the degradation of liberal cities. So what? It's like, that's not your job. Your job is not to address how the media portrays the city. Your job is to focus on the problems that are being exposed. Am I right? Nod or blink yes.
If I'm still alive, trapped in here. I want to address that. I first want to say that I don't know who Jesse is talking to in Chicago, but I haven't heard
him on my show.
Yeah, I don't think that black people are sitting around talking about the great replacement theory and how they can't get on a basketball court.
Wait a second. They had to have students leave fields because there wasn't enough room because of the migrants.
You
have to watch Jesse Waters primetime.
8 o'clock is bedtime for the baby, so I have it on in the background. She's a fan, mostly when your mom calls in or texts. No great replacement theory. To your point, Greg, I think you are correct that there's a decision that he made that he wanted to go towards kind of a more nationalized narrative about what's wrong with the Republican Party versus being a local city mayor. And I think that it can be difficult when you run one of these huge cities, right, that you don't feel necessarily that you're just a local guy, but that's what it is, right? You have a little plot of land, and that's what you're in charge of. And the people who put you in office, and by the way, chose him over Paul Vallis, who still a Democrat, tried and true Democrat here, but had a much tougher stance about things like immigration and supporting the police was an option. And when I was watching the footage of the city council meeting where they wouldn't allow them to take the vote on maintaining sanctuary city status, I was thinking, are people having buyer's remorse on this, that they should at least have the option to have a Democrat in office who's going to listen to their concerns? He did inherit a whole host of problems from Lori Lightfoot and from the mayor before her and the mayor before him. But homicides in Chicago are down 10% from this time last year. They're down here in New York. They're down in Philadelphia. D.C. is an outlier in terms of liberal cities, and we've talked about what's going on in D.C. a lot. But I don't think that when people feel so overwhelmed by what's going on and the migrant crisis that they're necessarily sitting at homes and talking about the broad strokes of that. They're talking about the fact that they know that a little girl down the street was shot in a drive-by shooting.
But I mean, murder is obviously the worst crime, but people are leaving the cities not because of murder, but everything. Crime in general, larceny, carjackings.
Right.
I'm just saying one of the things that we talked about was...
Jesse. People are leaving New York.
He left.
Jesse, I left.
He forced himself out. Anyway.
All right.
That's it. Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.